Okay, welcome back. This is Matt for AVC. This is our install video for the Ford Transit 148 extended roof rack. All right, so let's take a look what's inside the box. Included with your extended high roof kit is going to be 10 80/20 crossbars, your front blades, your rear blades, your center blades, and the fairing. In the tower box, we have 2 pair of compression feet. We have 3 pairs of single towers and 2 pair of double towers. Also included is going to be all the necessary hardware to attach the towers to the van, blades to crossbars, towers to crossbars, and the extra bag for extended hardware. The pieces you're going to need to add are going to be tools to modify all the hardware. You're going to need a knife to open up some points on the van. We're going to need some tools here if we need to modify the roof a little bit compared to what Ford did, and then the necessary sealants to make sure it's watertight. That's it. See you out on the roof. Okay, so we're on top of the van. First thing we need to do, we're going to cut the access ports open. So underneath this cap from Ford is going to be an 8mm threaded insert. Sometimes they line up and sometimes they don't. So as we open them up, we'll take a look. When we find one that doesn't line up, we'll show you how to open that up. So without further ado, let's see what's going on. So I just push my knife in the center. I can find that steel underneath. Just follow it around with my knife and look. This one looks like it's close enough. I think it's gonna line up all right. But we'll cut the rest of these open and we'll see what it looks like. Oh yeah, that one. So this one is definitely out of line. So, like I mentioned before, if we find one of these threads that doesn't line up with the factory hole, we're gonna have to open it up a little bit. So for that we can use a step bit, and this is a bit of tool abuse, I will admit, but sometimes that's just the way it goes, and this is the best way to do it. So we're gonna use a step bit here. We're gonna try and just open this hole enough to get straight down to these threads. So we can use this. We're gonna make sure we don't go too deep. We don't want to damage the threads inside, and then we can work our way towards the outside and just take off a little bit. So let's try it out. That's it. So now that it's opened up, we did cut a little bit of that metal. So let's make sure we prime that so we're not going to get any rust in there. On to the next one. So we did find another one here that needs a little bit of adjustment. So this is a nibbler tool, $30 on Amazon. It's a pretty decent investment. If you're going to open some windows up on your van, you can actually do it with this tool. If you open a shop, you might want to get something a little bit nicer, but if you're a DIYer, this thing is going to do just fine for you. So we're just going to use this and nibble open that little bit of metal that we need to. A bit more. There we go, that looks good. That's perfect. So that's gonna do just fine. I would recommend hitting this with a little bit of primer again, just to make sure we don't get any rust. Okay, so we're on top of the van. Before we install this tower, let's prep this space with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, make sure we get a nice clean bond. Then we can set our tower over the top. And I did not bring any tools up here because I want to make sure we don't tighten these towers too tight. So we want to make sure everything is nice and loose until we get the complete system all together, then we can start tightening things up. So right now we're just going to hand tighten these bolts. And that's enough. We want to make sure we have lots of play in them. Alrighty, so our towers are on and they're loose. We're ready to put up our blades. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to get these things on here loose. Then we'll get everything set up. We'll get our crossbars and all that. So the one piece we want to make sure is that our logo is facing out. On the driver's side, the G is going to be at the back. Then this is going to line up here at the very back. So we have the double tower is going to line up at the middle. And then this one here. I like to start with our center hardware because that's going to be the easiest to mount. So we just have 3 pieces of hardware. The 5/16 bolt is going to go here at the front. And then we're going to have our washer and our jam nut on the inside. The washer here. And then jam nut on. So now there's one that's holding it on. I like to get one on each blade first, then I can double them up. Okay, so now that this is on here, you might notice there's a slight bend in this blade, and that's from the heating and cooling process from the powder coat. It's not a problem, and once we get all of our crossbars on here, it's gonna lock everything into place. The rack is gonna feel really loose until we get the entire rack assembled, and that's why we wanna get everything on there loose to start, then start tightening things up, because we need a little bit of movement. You'll notice we have pill shapes in both the tower and the blade, so the blade can shift forward and backward, and that's so that, we can adjust little bits if we need to and get everything lined up, then we can tighten it up. So, not a problem that we have a little bit of curve in here. Once we get everything on there, it's gonna be rock solid. The middle blade is symmetrical the way it mounts to the tower, but this point where we can mount our crossbar is not symmetrical. So it doesn't matter if it goes on this way or this way, as long as you match the opposite side, so our crossbars are gonna line up. So I prefer to have a little bit of tightness right here in the middle, because that's where most of my stuff is going to end up when I'm storing things on the rack. Okay, so now we're down to the front blade. Both the front blades are the same, so we don't have to worry about which one goes on what side, anything like that. Whoopsie daisy. So it helps to have a pocket full of hardware. Probably best not to do this in the grass. Thank you, sir. Here to the middle. Again, we just want to make sure this last pill opening is tight to the back end, same as we did on the driver's side. Other than that, same as we go. Now I have had people ask me why we have the blades, we have multiple blades for the rack, and that's just so it ships smaller and cheaper for you. You know, we could do one giant piece, but man, it would cost as much in shipping as it does for the entire rack. So we did this because it's just easier to make, manufacture, ship, handle, all the above. Woo, that van is getting hot. All right, that's it. Onto the front. All right. So we just get this front one on, and we are ready for crossbars. And I can't stress this enough, don't tighten everything up first. You're gonna be tempted to just tighten this step, move on to the next thing. If you notice, I have no tools out here at all. So I'm just doing everything hand tight. Once everything is hand tight, and the crossbars are on, everything is on, then we can start tightening up the band. All right, so we're all wrapped up now. We got our front blade on. I just want to stress again, don't tighten everything up. If you notice, I have not touched a single tool yet so far, and that's on purpose. You're going to be tempted to just tighten these things up at every step, but it's not going to work out well for you. We want to get everything on and assembled before we start tightening things up. Trust me, it's going to be a nice solid rack once it's all assembled and tight. So let's move on to crossbars. Alrighty, so we're ready to start installing crossbars. We recommend at least 2 per blade section on the van. We give you 10 with the kit, so you can kind of add them wherever you need to or wherever you want. I think 1 is best at the very back of the van, as long as you don't have an AC hanging over the back. But it should even fit an AC, because this rack is pretty long for this extended. And you're gonna reserve 1 for the fairing at the front of the van. So we're gonna put crossbars on first, then we'll get that fairing on. So we'll just open up this baggie, has the quarter 20s. I like to line up one here towards the front of the vehicle.
Talk about the heights on the side, Matt. The height, the clearance. Remember we had talked about that?
Yes. I'll talk about that maybe when we get to the other side.
Okay.
Just because then they'll be like flat across the top. So I like to get everything started on one side. We'll get all the crossbars laid out, get all these started on one side, then we'll jump over to the other side, and we'll get them going. If you have any friends, unlike me, you can have somebody on the other side helping you out. While here by myself. So as we're getting this last crossbar on, now we can actually start thinking about starting to tighten these crossbars up. I also want to bring up the point that the little shark fin antenna right here is going to clear our fairing just fine. People do ask about that online, so I just want to make sure you understand, not an issue. So now the moment you all been waiting for, the Allen key. We do want to think about where this bar is positioned in the slot. Whether it's at the front, it's at the back, it doesn't matter. You can stick it right in the middle if you like. For this one, I'm going to go for the back. Okay. And we can actually give these snug. Now we do include Loctite with the kit, and the Loctite is meant for attaching these crossbars. If you know your placement and you are 100% confident, you can put that on there. Until then, I would recommend getting the rack up, making sure everything works right, make sure your fan's in, all that kind of stuff. You can always pop these out, put some thread locker back in there and pop them back in. That way they're not going to go bad on you, or they're not going to loosen up. Also, we recommend checking tightness after 100 miles. So make sure you double check that rack, make sure everything looks good and tight after you've had a chance to test drive it a bit. We're looking snug there. We're going to work our way back down and around, get everything snugged up. Alright, so at this point we are ready to assemble our fairing to our crossbar. We're going to grab our shortest quarter 20 and our T-nut. We're going to pre-assemble these on the fairing, and then we're going to slide our crossbar on top. And it's going to be tight. Then we just want to make sure we're nice and even. Should be about 1/4 of an inch of overlap on each side. We can flip it over and then tighten these up with our Allen wrench. Now that 2-degree bevel inside the 80/20 is going to give us some good positive tension, and it should keep these from rattling loose. You know, I do trust the design of 80/20. I know it's a great product. But if you want to put a little bit of Loctite that is provided, it's not going to hurt either. Now, we're ready to go up to the roof. So before I jump up on the van, I just want to give a quick shout out to Solid Woodworks. He did another install video of one of our roof racks, and he suggested wrapping one of the ends up in foam so we don't scratch the roof up. Great idea. So, taking his advice, we're going to jump up here and install this thing. I think so. Oh, sorry, Dad. Are you good? So at this point, We want to adjust our rack so it's just flush right here at the fairing. So we're flush right here at the very top of the rack. We got a little bit of a gap here. That's okay. That's by design. At this point, we're ready to start tightening our blades to our towers. So we're going to grab our 1/2" wrench, our 3/16 Allen key. I'm going to start tightening. I'm going to tighten just this top bolt here. Then I'm going to move to the back of the tower, tighten this, because right now we have a little bit of play in here. And I want to make sure I have this in its lower position, because that's the way I like to set my rack up. If you need that little bit of clearance, you can bring the entire rack up, but I don't really see why you would need it. So we're going to push down on the back here. We're going to get this front one tight first. 3/16 here. Tighten this down. Okay. Then when I push down in the back here, I can tighten this. Then I can jump to the lower, tighten it. Then I can come up to the front, tighten this last one up front. My towers are still not anything but hand tight to the van. That's going to be our last tighten. So now that our blades are tied to our towers, we have the final step of tightening the 8mm stainless bolts into the roof. Whenever you're putting stainless hardware into a non-stainless thing, like the van here, it's just regular steel, there is a chance of galling. So if you want to put a little bit of anti-seize on there, it's definitely not the wrong thing to do. So let's tighten these things up. So we just tightened up the towers to the vehicle. Our last step, well, second to last step. All right, so we just tightened up the towers to the vehicle. The last piece we need to install is going to be our compression foot. This is just going to keep the back end of that rack from bouncing around when it's loaded, things like that. We're going to install one up at the very front of this as well. The rear compression foot is exclusive to the extended rack. The front compression foot is consistent with every rack we offer. So let's jump up there and put it in. So for the rear of the vehicle, this compression foot can be installed on the inside or the outside. I think it looks best if it's towards the inside. So we're just going to line it right up. Hand thread in our hardware. Now we're going to get it almost tight. Now before we get this last little bit, let's just give it a little bit of pressure here so that we have some nice solid tension. There we go. Okay, nice solid. That's good. Now we jump to the front. So now we're back at the very front here. This is going to be the last piece we're going to install. It's our front compression foot. For this front compression foot, it's very important that the foot is actually oriented out and it's going to sit in the rain gutter itself. So we have it wedged in here. It's in place. Again, we're just going to hand tighten our hardware to start. And then right before I get it all the way tight, I'm just going to give it a little bit of pressure. And we're set. So now, when that driving wind is on there, we're not going to get any flutters, any kind of road noise, anything like that coming out of our fairing. So that's it. We got all of our bolts in. Everything is tight. Everything should be good. Our roof rack is nice and solid. Last thing we need to do is going to be goop these up. Then again, don't forget, after 100 miles, go ahead and check all your hardware again. We'll see you on the road.